When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to stand up, speak out, and get in trouble. Good trouble, necessary trouble.
Yes.
That's why we need to restore
The vote.
Woo, restore the vote.
Folks, that was Congressman John Lewis yesterday at a rally on the Capitol grounds, driving home the issue and the importance of a new bill to address the issue of voting rights in this country. You might remember the Shelby versus Holder decision, where the Supreme Court essentially gutted a key provision of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So far, Republicans have been unwilling to move on this particular bill. They, frankly, haven't done anything, even though a Republican has offered a solution to fix the issues raised by the Supreme Court justices. Moral leaders yesterday organized that particular march. They were joined by NAACP, other civil rights activists, plus various elected officials, again, driving home the critical issue of voting rights. It is a fundamental right in this country. And of course, with a number of local elections coming up this year, plus of course, you have the midterm elections in 2018. Voting is going to be a crucial issue. Let's talk about this very issue, this bill, and what can be done to elevate and raise, of course, the people to rise up to force this through. Reverend Dr. William Barber, the president and senior lecturer, repairs of the breach. Of course, he was joined by several members of the clergy out there. We also joined by Reverend Jennifer Butler, CEO of Faith in Public Life. Also joining me right now on the panel, Angela Saylor, Director of Coalitions for the Republican National Committee, Mary Curtis, columnist for Roll Call. We'll be later joined by Barbara Arnwine. Dr. Barber, first I want to start with you. 4 years since the Supreme Court decision and still no action by Republicans in Congress. They have no inclination whatsoever to do anything on this very issue because, frankly, they're benefiting from voter suppression.
Yeah, the longest filibuster and interposition nullification we've seen since 1957 when Strom Thurmond filibustered the Civil Rights Act for 24 hours. We've had 4 years of filibustering. And everything that we said and everything that the justices said, like Ginsburg, what happened has happened. Every state in the South has passed voter suppression. North Carolina had the worst. Took us 4 years to beat them. Even the Supreme Court had to agree with us, even Clarence Thomas. At the very time Jeff Sessions was backing away, as soon as he became Attorney General, he pulled out of the case, and then the Supreme Court said it was surgical racism. We've also just had a victory on redistricting. Racist redistricting took us 7 years to win, but we won 6 years to win. Now, you have many Republicans talking about fraud. There is no fraud. The case of fraud is fraudulent. The reality is, however, the case of voter suppression has been proven and upheld by the Supreme Court in unanimous decisions.
Jennifer, it was very interesting how after President Barack Obama's election in 2008, all of a sudden there was this massive rush by various states to enact voter ID laws. I remember the case out of Pennsylvania where the justification for that was voter fraud. Yet when they got sued and they went to federal court, they had to submit documentation, and the Attorney General of Pennsylvania submitted documentation saying, one, they had no proof of voter fraud, and in fact, if they did, the voter ID law they had still could not stop it. You had the leading Republican in that state stand up and say Mitt Romney was going to win the election because of voter ID. So when I hear Republicans say, well, everyone should have a voter ID, it's about voter fraud, that is a lie. It is a fraudulent argument because in case after case, Texas, when they went before the federal court, they presented 12 cases in 10 years with more than 25 million votes cast or whatever the number was.
Yep. That's right. It's a lie. It's an assault on human dignity. And that's why faith communities around this country have to mobilize and are mobilizing. That's why we're showing up today in front of the Supreme Court at 10 o'clock, and we welcome all people to come and stand with us because we have to begin mobilizing now. We're seeing the impact now on our public policies. This is why they're able to do the most massive redistribution of wealth in our recent history with this healthcare reform bill. This is why we have an attorney general who can pass harsh sentencing reform acts and put black and brown people in jail at a massive rate. Racism is growing across this country, and we're undoing the gains of the civil rights movement. So we have to build a moral movement around this country to begin to protect people and protect human dignity.
And how is that happening? I mean, how are you? I mean, have you seen any success of folks on the other side of the aisle, conservative evangelicals who voted with Donald Trump in significant numbers, who frankly have been unwilling to say a word about voter suppression?
We actually are building a movement that includes evangelicals and Catholics and Jews and Muslims. State by state, we're building a movement. We're having people stand up and defend voting rights. And you are going to see a massive movement of faithful voters in 2018 that will defend everybody's right to vote.
Yeah. Reverend Barber, I want to go back to you. Again, what is interesting to me is when you have a Republican like Jim Sensenbrenner out of Wisconsin who has this particular bill. When he first introduced it, he had several Republican co-sponsors. The next session, he had half of that. Each year, fewer and fewer Republicans have signed on to that particular bill. So this is not a Democratic bill. This is a Republican member from Wisconsin. Even his own party does not care about this bill. And Bob Goodlatte, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, does not even want a hearing.
Well, it's a plan, bro. They cannot win. You would not have the Congress you have today without the voter suppression. And it's not just photo ID. In North Carolina, they tried to roll back same-day registration, early voting. You would not have the Congress you have today without the racist gerrymandering. So if you support fixing the Voting Rights Act, they will undermine their political ability. That's what this is about. 22 states since 2010 have passed voter suppression laws. Now watch this. Those same states are the states that need health care reform. They need health care. They need living wages. So there's a direct correlation between racist voter suppression, racist gerrymandering, and electing people who are undermining our attempts to get living wages and health care. We also know that in North Carolina, for instance, we had Republicans that went to jail with us. Now, they're Roosevelt, Eisenhower type Republicans, and we had many clergy because people are starting to understand long before the Russians hacked our system, voter suppression and racist gerrymandering and hacked our system. And I want to say that we're talking about apartheid redistricting. We're talking about racism. We're not talking about just political motivation. The courts have said, even the Roberts Court, even Clarence Thomas had to agree that the cases in North Carolina and that were the worst of all around the country was racism, systemic racism. But it's all a part of a plan. If you lie about voter fraud, if you don't act and fix the Voting Rights Act, then you allow people to win by cheating. We have an illegal legislature, for instance, in North Carolina. Lastly, we don't agree with the Sensenbrenner bill because that bill would have only had Alabama and Texas covered by the Voting Rights Act. People don't know that about the bill. It was a slick move. He was trying to get us to approve something that would have left North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, New York, and many other states out of the pre-clearance coverage.
What time is today's rally?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock? All right. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We'll continue to talk about voting. And so let me put this in context when it comes to our viewers. When you look at public policy, when we talk about the issues that we address all the time on this show, voting has a direct relationship with that. And so what often happens is when you say, well, I want to see this done on the city council, on the county government, done on the state legislature, that's based upon the folks who you're actually putting into office. And so when you don't vote, or when you have your vote impeded, then you don't have the ability to be able to have your public policy impacted. That's the fundamental problem. Now, again, so many people out there at home, you're saying, well, what's happening in Washington, D.C.? But the reality is most of the attacks on voting are taking place in state capitals. In 2010, you had 16 state legislatures that flipped in terms of their went complete majority run by Republicans. Now you have 31 Republican governors across the state. You're seeing states like Iowa. You saw in Maine where they even changed their voting procedures, where they got rid of same-day voter registration. Legislature did. The people didn't even ask for it. And so what happened? The following year, the voters put it back on the ballot and put it in place. And so you're seeing this happen all across the country. And so you may wonder, why do we talk about it a lot? Why do we focus on it on this show? It is because it has a direct correlation to what our agenda is and what the issues are in our community. So don't think for a second it doesn't matter. And so what needs to happen, this is where you need to see Divine Nine fraternities and sororities. We need to see the links where you actually need to see Ladies of Distinction, all these different men's groups mobilizing folks to understand why we must be opposing these various voter ID laws, because of a place like Florida, Republicans hold an 81-seat majority there because of political gerrymandering, racial gerrymandering, and because of these voter suppression, and you get an expansion of stand your ground as a result. So let's talk about it now again with our panel. Angela, I want to go to you. This isn't what I don't understand. I remember when Colin Powell was invited to North Carolina by the then governor. He chastised him, called him out publicly while he was sitting there, and the governor was not happy. Pat McCrory was not happy about that. But what I have not seen, and I'll keep saying on this show, a large group of black Republicans stand up and say to the party, this is fundamentally wrong, and this hurts black folks, and you're targeting African Americans. Why hasn't that happened? Why haven't we seen that group come forward and say, we oppose this?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I think that, Roland, you've got a great platform to be able to invite those black Republican leaders to have a platform to be able to do that. They won't come on. They won't come on? They
won't come on. I mean, we've been calling for months now to get Congressman Will Hurd back. He's actually been on the show before. Congresswoman Mia Love has never been on the show. Senator Tim Scott has been several months. But even when I've had folks on the show, whether it was Brandon Cooper, whether it was Ralph Chittops, and I can go down the line, and then they all say, I've said this individually. What I'm saying, I think it makes a difference if you have 100, 200, 300 hold a news conference in front of the Republican National Committee's office at the National Press Club, actually condemning voter suppression and saying to the party, we know this is nonsense and you're targeting black folks. I don't understand why that hasn't happened.
I agree with you. And in addition to that, I believe our black Republican brothers and sisters and our Democratic black brothers and sisters need to be standing together as well. As your guest said before, this issue is so important that we need Americans as a whole to come together. This is not partisan. And for black people, this is about our community. This is about the history of our community and the things that we've been fighting for and the future of our community. So I agree with you.
And I think also some of the black Republican office holders have seen what happens when someone like a Colin Powell speaks out. They're pretty much ostracized and read out of the party. And if you want to protect your power position, you are going to go along with the program. But at a certain point, you have to make a moral decision. Now, for Republicans, this is such a cynical move. They see the demographics. They see how in the future it's going to be a black and brown country. And they're saying, okay, we can either promote ideas that will draw these voters in and be inclusive, or we can keep them from voting. And I think, unfortunately, they've looked at that second piece, realizing that at a certain point, demographics are going to overtake you. But for now, we can have these laws. Even in North Carolina, where I'm based most of the time, when the court threw them out, they manipulated early voting sites, where they were, when they were open, using every little thing they could do, even though the law was read out as racist. But we'll see how long they can throw their lot in with the Republicans.
Barber, one of the things that is important here, again, when you talk about this particular issue, and again, I think a lot of people they hear it, but they go, oh, okay, I don't really see it. Mainstream media totally ignores this. I mean, they wait until October before the election and talk about it, when that train has long left. But this has a direct correlation between everything that happens in our community, whether you're talking about resources, whether you're talking about allocation, whether you're talking about a community center being built, whether you're talking about a park being refurbished, who you put in office directly relates to everything that we talk about in our community.
Absolutely. And what's so important is for people to understand that in 2016, for the first time, we saw a backwards reversal of the number of African Americans who actually had their ballots counted. We saw a drop of over 2 million votes, an 11% decrease when we should have had a 6% increase. All of this is voter suppression.
I got to interrupt you. We were on the increase before Obama.
That's right.
Every year, black votes was good.
That's right.
People say, well, the Obama effect. No.
No.
Black people were increasing.
That's correct.
Every year.
And our demographic, just the fact that we had new, younger voters coming on, 18 years old, over and over again. So this is a strategy that is being deployed to shrink the electorate.
Got it.
To take out the people who would be progressive, and it affects everything. It affects children. It affects Medicaid. You sit up there worried right now about how your people are going to get some kind of health care because of this new health care threat. Well, it wouldn't be there if we were able to actually have our votes reflected in the electorate. So this is a real fight. It's a fundamental fight, and I'm with you 100% that this should not be partisan. I will say that one thing that happened yesterday that I'm so proud of is that the Congressman Vesey dropped his bill to defund the Election Integrity Commission, which is Donald Trump's new voter suppression commission.
That joke of a commission.
Yes, so he dropped the bill to defund it, that no taxpayer money can be used to operate it.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.